Lyra walked through the dense forest, her boots pressing softly against the damp earth beneath her. The trees towered above, their dark branches twisting together, blocking out the sun. Strange calmness filled the air, but Lyra couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was off. Her glowing blue eyes flickered in response to the ever-present threat that she could sense in the distance. It was something she had been trained to notice ever since she was young, the warning of danger, the sign that something was not right. Her ancestors had gifted her this ability. Her eyes glowed blue whenever danger was nearby. It was a part of her alien heritage, a mark of her people who had lived hidden for centuries. And tonight, as she walked deeper into the forest, those glowing eyes told her that something dangerous was near. She paused for a moment, looking around, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up, her senses heightened. Every rustle of leaves seemed amplified. Every small movement in the shadows felt like it might be a threat. Her heart pounded as she slowly turned her head to the left, then the right. Scanning the area for any sign of the danger her instincts told her was drawing closer. Suddenly, there was a rustle in the bushes ahead. Lyra froze, her blue eyes intensifying. As she prepared to react, the blue glow was more vibrant now, almost blinding in its intensity, signaling that something was coming, something dangerous. She crouched, preparing to strike or defend herself. But when the figure stepped into the clearing, Lyra was taken aback. It wasn't a creature she was used to. No claws, no fangs, no glowing eyes like hers. It was a human, the man appeared. To be in his mid-20s, with wild brown hair, dirt on his clothes, and a look of confusion on his face. He was clearly lost, his eyes wide and unfocused as he stumbled into the clearing. His movements were sluggish, and he appeared weak, as though he had been wandering for hours, perhaps days, in the forest. Lyra's first instinct was to turn and leave. Humans were not her concern. They were fragile and insignificant compared to the creatures of her world. They didn't belong in this place, and they definitely didn't belong in her path. But something about this man was different. There was a strange energy around him, an energy that Lyra couldn't quite understand. And for some unknown reason, she felt drawn to him. Her glowing eyes flickered, dimming for a moment as her curiosity overcame her initial fear. She stepped closer, her movements silent as the wind whispered through the trees. The man didn't seem to notice her. He was too preoccupied with the struggle of staying upright, the weight of exhaustion clearly taking its toll on him. "Are you lost?" Lyra asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. Yet it carried through the air. The man's head snapped up, his gaze locking onto hers. His eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, neither of them spoke.
Lyra could sense his confusion, his disbelief.
He must have been wondering if she was real. I don't know where I am," he said, his voice strained. "I was just hiking, and now I'm here. I don't understand. Everything's wrong. This place it's not like anything I've ever seen." Lyra stared at him, her glowing eyes still bright, her body poised and ready. She could feel his fear, but it wasn't like the fear she'd sensed from others. It was different. He wasn't afraid of her. He was afraid of something else, something bigger, something more dangerous. Lyra's instincts told her this wasn't just a random encounter. This human was here for a reason, and it was somehow connected to her. "You shouldn't be here," Lyra said, her voice low, her eyes scanning the area for threats. The forest had always been a place of danger for her people, but now it felt different. The air seemed thicker, charged with something that made the hairs on her neck stand up. Something was closing in. She could feel it. The man took a step toward her, his eyes focused now on the glow of her eyes. "I didn't ask to be here. I don't even know how I ended up here. I need help, please." Lyra's heart softened for a moment, something inside her stirring that she couldn't explain. She had been taught to remain distant, to never let herself be distracted by emotions, especially when dealing with humans. But as she looked at the man standing before her, so vulnerable, so lost, something about him was different. She could feel it deep within her, and that's when it happened. Her eyes flashed brighter for a moment, as if her very soul was reacting to the presence of this human. A strange warmth filled her chest, and for the first time in her life, Lyra felt the instinct to protect someone, to keep them safe from whatever it was that stalked the forest. But why? Why did she feel this way about him? He was just a human. After all, what was it about him that caused her heart to race, her mind to swirl with confusion? And why did her glowing blue eyes only react when he was near? The air around them thickened as Lyra's blue eyes dimmed slightly, signaling a new presence. Her instinct screamed at her to leave, to take the man and run, but something deep inside her urged her to stay. "Come with me," Lyra said suddenly, her voice more urgent than before. "It's not safe here." And as they turned, the forest around them seemed to darken, the shadows growing longer, the sense of danger intensifying. Neither of them knew what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. This meeting was no accident. Lyra's feet moved swiftly over the forest floor, her steps barely making a sound. The human John followed her cautiously, still clearly disoriented from his long ordeal. His eyes were fixed on her, his gaze lingering on the soft, almost ethereal glow of her blue eyes. He didn't speak, but his expression held a mixture of awe and curiosity, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. The forest seemed quieter now, more still than before. The usual sounds of birds, rustling leaves, and distant creatures had all but vanished. All that remained was the sound of their footsteps and the occasional murmur of the wind. It was almost as if the world itself was holding its breath. Lyra's mind raced. She had been trained to sense danger, to navigate the forest without hesitation, and to never let emotions cloud her judgment. But as she walked beside John, her glowing eyes reflecting the dim light, she felt something she couldn't explain, a pull, an invisible thread that connected her to him. It wasn't the sense of danger that usually filled her senses, nor was it a threat. It was something ... different. John, on the other hand, felt a strange calmness around her. The panic he had felt earlier when he was lost in the forest had faded, replaced by an odd sense of safety. It was as though the moment he locked eyes with Lyra, the confusion and fear that had gripped him melted away. He wasn't sure what was happening, but in Lyra's presence, he felt like everything would be okay. Still, there was a nagging question. In the back of his mind, who was she? Why did her eyes glow, and why did they make him feel something he couldn't describe? "Where are we going?" John finally asked, breaking the silence between them. His voice was raspy, hoarse from dehydration. But there was an underlying curiosity in his tone. Lyra didn't look at him as she spoke, her gaze scanning the path ahead. "Somewhere safe," she replied briefly, her voice distant but steady. She had no time to explain herself, fully not yet. But even as she said the words, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening that shouldn't be. A flicker of something dark caught her attention in the distance. Her eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment it was as if the entire forest had shifted, the air thickening with an unspoken tension. She stopped abruptly, raising her hand to signal to John to stop as well. Her gaze was sharp now, focused on something just beyond the trees. John, sensing the sudden change in her demeanor, looked around, his senses heightened. "What is it?" he whispered, stepping closer to her. Lyra's hand remained raised, her blue eyes flickering like a beacon in the dark. "We're not alone," she murmured, her voice low and urgent. Something was out there, something that Lyra's senses had picked up before John could even notice. The glow in her eyes intensified, casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. A moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the soft, almost imperceptible sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. They weren't human footsteps. Lyra's sharp ears caught the sound of claws scraping against bark, and the faint rustle of something large moving through the underbrush. Her heart skipped a beat. It was the creatures, the ones she had sensed earlier. They were close now. John, sensing the change in the atmosphere, turned to Lyra. "What's happening? Who's out there?" Lyra's blue eyes flickered. She had to act fast. Her mind raced through her options. She could fight, but she wasn't sure she could protect both herself and John at once. Her instincts told her that the creatures wouldn't hesitate to attack, but something else inside her told her that she wasn't ready to leave John behind. There was a bond between them now, a strange, unexplained connection that kept pulling her back. Even as danger loomed on the horizon, her eyes locked onto John's, and for a moment they stood there, staring at each other. It was as if the world around them had disappeared, and all that remained was the intense energy between them. Lyra felt her heart race, her mind spinning. What was this feeling? Was it fear or something else entirely? She didn't have time to process it. "We have to move now?" Lyra said, grabbing John's arm and pulling him along with her. Her grip was firm, her determination clear. She wasn't going to let anything happen to him, not while she could protect him. As they hurried deeper into the forest, Lyra could feel the creatures drawing closer. Their presence was like a shadow, a weight pressing down on the air itself. John struggled to keep up, his legs weak, but Lyra's speed was unmatched. Her glowing eyes cut through the darkness, guiding them as they sprinted through the thick forest. But despite the danger, there was something about John that Lyra couldn't ignore. Every time their hands brushed or their eyes met, the pull between them grew stronger. Alien instincts told her to stay focused, to avoid distractions. But she couldn't help the strange feeling that kept tugging at her heart. And then just as they reached a clearing, Lyra stopped abruptly, her senses tingling with urgency. She turned to John, her voice now low and steady. "Stay close," she whispered, her blue eyes fixed on him. "I don't know why, but something is pulling us together. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." John stared at her, a mix of confusion and awe in his eyes. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but he could feel it too, the bond, the connection. And despite the danger that lurked just beyond the trees, for the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't afraid. Lyra's breath came in quick, controlled bursts as she darted through the thick underbrush, her blue eyes flickering in the dim light like beacons in the night. She could feel the creatures closing in, their presence unmistakable, but something else was beginning to stir within hers, something she hadn't expected. As she sprinted ahead, John was struggling to keep up, his face pale with exhaustion. His steps were heavy, but he wasn't slowing down. There was something about him that pushed him forward, despite the fear gnawing at his insides. He was terrified, but there was also a determination in his eyes that matched Lyra's. They were both running from something, but neither of them knew what exactly. All they knew was that they had to keep moving. The air around them grew heavier, and the forest seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. It was as if the very earth beneath them was alive, reacting to their presence. Lyra's glowing eyes narrowed, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. The creatures were near, and yet there was something else, something new that she hadn't expected. John's voice broke through the tension. "Lyra, what's happening? What's out there?" "Answer him immediately." Her senses were overloaded. The familiar warning signs were their danger. Yes, but there was something more. The pull between her and John had grown stronger, and the closer they got to the clearing, the more intense the connection became. It was as if their energies were beginning to merge, the boundaries between them blurring. Lyra could feel his pulse quicken, the adrenaline in his veins matching her own. But there was also something else, something that felt foreign, almost as if it had always been there but was only now coming to the surface. She paused, her eyes scanning the horizon. The glowing light of her eyes pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, brighter and brighter, as though it were feeding off the growing tension. John, still breathing heavily, slowed to a halt beside her. He looked at her, confusion and worry in his eyes. "Lyra," he asked again, his voice more insistent. Without warning, sharp pain shot through Lyra's chest, like a crack opening deep within her. It was as if something within her was awakening, something buried beneath the surface for years. Her alien blood seemed to stir in response, and her eyes flared brighter than ever. She stumbled, her knees weakening under the force of it. "Lyra, are you okay?" John reached out, catching her before she could fall. Lyra gasped, her breath shallow. The pain was overwhelming, but it wasn't just physical. It was as if something inside her was trying to break free, to emerge from the depths of her being. She clenched her fists, trying to steady herself. I don't know," she whispered, her voice shaking. Her eyes locked onto John's, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. The air between them thickened, the connection growing more palpable. She could feel his heart beating in sync with hers, a rhythm she couldn't explain. Suddenly, everything around them went silent. The rustling of the trees, the distant howls of the creatures, the pulse of danger, all faded. In that moment, the only thing that existed was Lyra and John. She could feel his breath on her skin, the warmth of his presence seeping into her very soul. And as the connection between them deepened, something inside her began to wake up. Her eyes shifted, glowing even brighter, casting an ethereal light over their surroundings. A low hum began to vibrate in her chest, a sound she hadn't heard before. It wasn't just a physical reaction. It was something deep within her alien heritage, something ancient, something primal. Lyra's heart raced as memories flooded her. Mind, her people, her legacy, her true purpose. She stumbled back away from John, her hands instinctively moving to her chest, as if she could stop the sudden surge of energy. This isn't possible, she muttered, more to herself. Then to him. John stepped forward, his voice filled with concern. Lyra, what's happening to you? Lyra shook her head, struggling to focus. I don't know. Something is changing. It's like my whole body is awakening. The air around them crackled with an unfamiliar energy, and for the first time, Lyra felt a surge of power she had never experienced before. It was as if her alien blood, dormant for so long, was finally coming alive, responding to the bond between her and John. And then, without warning, Lyra's glowing eyes flickered, and for the briefest moment, a vision appeared in her mind. She saw her ancestors, the ancient beings who had once ruled the stars, and felt their power coursing through her. She saw them reaching out to her, calling her to embrace her destiny. And in that moment, Lyra realized the truth, this connection. Between her and John was no accident. It was part of something far bigger than either of them could comprehend. The energy within her surged, and for a moment she was overwhelmed by the power that threatened to consume her. But then, just as suddenly, it all faded. The glow of her eyes dimmed and the vision disappeared as quickly as it had come. John watched her with wide eyes, uncertainty clouding his features. Lyra, are you okay? She looked at him, her breath shaky but steadying. I don't know what just happened, she said, her voice quiet but filled with awe. But whatever it was, it's just the beginning. The pull between them had grown stronger than ever, and now Lyra knew that whatever path lay ahead, it was intertwined with John's. They were no longer just two beings in the forest running from danger. They were something more, a force that had been set into motion. Long before they had ever met, and whatever that force was, it was awakening now. The quiet had returned, but the calm felt unsettling. Lyra and John stood at the edge of the clearing, the air between them crackling with tension. Lyra's glowing blue eyes, though dimming from the overwhelming energy surge, still shimmered. In the darkness, she could feel it, the creeping, undeniable presence of something dark approaching. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to hide. But something inside her refused to leave John as she tried to steady her breath, the faintest rustle of leaves reached her ears, too soft to be a breeze. Lyra's eyes snapped to the trees, her muscles coiling like a spring ready to explode. John, sensing the change in her demeanor, instinctively took a step closer to her, though he had no idea what was happening. He could see the panic in her eyes, the flicker of something dangerous lurking just beyond their sight. A low growl reverberated through the trees, distant but unmistakable. Lyra's heart thudded in her chest. She had heard that sound before. The creatures were near. Lyra, John whispered, barely a breath. What is that noise? What's happening? Lyra didn't answer. She was already moving, her body instinctively pulling John deeper into the forest. The ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble with every step they took. The vibrations from the approaching creatures, making it feel as if the forest itself was alive. A warning in its every movement. They're close, Lyra said through gritted teeth, her voice barely above a whisper. You need to stay close, John. Trust me. John nodded, his face etched with fear, but he didn't question her. He didn't understand what was happening, but there was something about the way She moved the urgency in her voice that made him believe every word. He followed her without hesitation, trying to keep up as they weaved through the thick underbrush. The growl grew louder. The air began to smell. Wrong. There was an unnatural stench of decay, as though the forest itself was decaying with every passing second. Lyra's eyes flickered with unease. These creatures weren't like anything she had faced before. They were relentless, powerful, and driven by an ancient hunger and instinct to hunt and destroy anything that came into their path. A sudden crack of breaking branches pierced the silence. Lyra froze, her body taut, her eyes scanning the trees. She could see shadows moving between the trunks, fast, almost fluid to fast for ordinary animals. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized they were surrounded. "They're here," Lyra murmured, her voice tight with the tension of knowing what was coming. John's hand instinctively reached for hers, his grip firm and reassuring. "What? Are they? What do we do?" Lyra's breath caught. She glanced at him, and for the first time, she felt her connection to him pulse through her entire being. She didn't just feel him physically holding her hand. No, she felt him deep inside, in the core of her very essence. It was like their hearts were beating as one. The strange, powerful bond between them was more than just the physical. It was something connected to their fates, to their survival. "We run," she said, her voice laced with a strength that wasn't entirely her own. "And we don't stop." Before John could react, she pulled him with her deeper into the woods. The creatures were getting closer. The sound of their claws scraping against bark, the low growl growing louder, it was almost deafening. Lyra's instincts screamed at her to fight, but something in her resisted. She wasn't sure why, but she felt a compulsion to protect John, to get him to safety. If that meant running, then she would run. They stumbled through the thick forest, the shadows, growing longer as the moon began to rise, casting an eerie glow over the scene. Lyra's mind raced, her eyes constantly flicking back to the approaching creatures. She couldn't outrun them forever. They were fast, relentless, and every time she glanced back, she could sense their bloodlust, their hunger. Suddenly, they burst into a clearing, a small, almost sacred place in the forest, one Lyra had only seen in her dreams. The air was cool here, the ground soft beneath their feet, and for a brief moment, Lyra felt a sense of peace. But it didn't last long. The creatures were closing in. They were too fast, too relentless. Lyra's heart pounded. She glanced at John, who was gasping for breath. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. But there was something else there, something Lyra couldn't quite place. A flicker of resolve? Was he ready to fight? Without thinking, Lyra pulled him behind a large rock hiding in the shadows. She held her breath, her senses reaching out to find any sign of the creatures. Her eyes glowed faintly, but she willed herself to remain calm. Every muscle in her body screamed to fight, to do something. But she couldn't risk giving away their position. The growl came again, louder this time. Lyra could feel the creatures just beyond the trees, their presence. Growing closer, their hunger almost palpable. John, his eyes still wide with fear, whispered, "What are they? Why are they after us?" Lyra's hand tightened around his, her mind racing. She had never felt so vulnerable, so helpless. But then, as if to answer his question, the first creature emerged from the trees. It was tall, its skin slick and black, with glowing eyes that reflected the moonlight. Its claws scraped against the bark of the trees as it stalked into the clearing, its head tilting as if searching for them. Lyra's heart stopped. This creature was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It was more powerful, more intelligent, and more dangerous than anything she had seen in her life. Her mind raced. She had no choice but to fight, but she couldn't do it alone. And then, as her blue eyes met John's in the dim light, a surge of power stronger than anything she had ever felt before flooded her veins. It was time to awaken. The night had fallen completely now, shrouding the forest in darkness. Lyra and John lay in the shadows, their bodies pressed close against the cold earth, their breathing shallow. The creatures were circling the clearing, their dark shapes moving, like shadows against the moonlight. Lyra's heart raced, and her blue eyes flickered with intensity, casting an eerie glow around the small area. The creatures were searching, their glowing eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Lyra felt the pull of John's hand in hers, a silent connection between them, stronger than ever. The strange bond they shared had never been clearer. She could feel his heart beating faster, his fear mixing with her own. But there was something else, something new. Beneath the fear, beneath the tension, there was a spark of something deeper, something more powerful. Lyra didn't know what it was, but she felt it. It was as if their destinies were intertwined, their fates tied together in ways she couldn't explain. As the creatures drew closer, Lyra's mind raced. She needed to protect John. Her instincts screamed at her to fight. But the more she focused on the approaching danger, the more she felt the overwhelming surge of power inside her, force she couldn't fully control. John still trying to steady. His breath turned to her, his eyes filled with confusion and determination. "Lyra, what are they? What's happening to you?" His voice was low, but the fear was evident. He could feel the shift in her, the change. But he didn't understand what was happening or why he was so drawn to her. Lyra didn't know how to answer him. Her mind was clouded with the growing power inside her, the ancient energy that she had never fully understood, never truly embraced. But now, it was impossible to ignore. It was calling to her, urging her to unleash it, to let it consume her. The creature's growls grew louder, closer. They were moving in for the kill, and Lyra knew they didn't have much time left. It was either fight or die. There was no other choice. She squeezed John's hand tightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Stay close. Whatever happens, don't let go." And then, in that moment, something inside her snapped. The energy that had been simmering beneath the surface erupted. Her blue eyes flared brighter than they had ever been before, glowing like twin orbs of power. The force inside her surged outward, a wave of raw energy that made the ground tremble beneath them. John gasped, his eyes widening in shock. He could feel it now, the power, the intensity. It wasn't just Lyra, it was both of them. Something was awakening between them, something neither of them had expected. The creatures paused, their eerie eyes locking onto Lyra, sensing the sudden surge of energy. They hissed, their claws scraping against the ground as they began to circle, moving closer with more caution. But Lyra didn't flinch. She stood tall, her glowing eyes locked on them, her body pulsing with power. John, still in awe, watched as Lyra's form seemed to shift, as if she were becoming something else entirely. The connection between them had deepened, and he felt his own strength rising as well. There was a part of him he didn't recognize, a part of him that seemed to respond to Lyra's power. It was as if the two of them were becoming one, their fates bound together in this moment. "Lyra," John whispered, the words escaping him before he could stop them. "What? What are we?" Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't one of comfort. It was a smile filled with understanding of the power they now shared. The creatures, sensing the change, let out a deep growl, their eyes narrowing with malice. They had underestimated her, underestimated them. The first creature lunged forward, its claws gleaming in the moonlight. But Lyra was faster. With a single movement, she raised her hand, and the air around them shifted. A force, raw and untamed, shot out from her fingertips. The creature recoiled, crashing into a tree as if it had been thrown by a massive force. John stared in shock. He'd never seen anything like it. But before he could say a word, another creature charged toward them, faster this time, its claws extended, ready to strike. Lyra reacted instinctively, her blue eyes flaring even brighter. This time, the power inside her didn't just surge, exploded. A wave of energy erupted from her, powerful enough to send the creature flying back, its body slamming into the forest floor with a sickening thud. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. The power was intoxicating but dangerous. She felt as though it could consume her if she let it. But then something inside her shifted. The connection with John had deepened even further. Their energies were entwined, and she realized this was more than just survival. This was destiny. But even as the creatures began to retreat, circling warily, Lyra knew this wasn't the end. They had just begun to uncover the truth of what was happening to them. And as the air crackled with tension, Lyra understood one thing: whatever came next, they would face it together. She turned to John, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "This isn't over yet. Whatever this is, we're in this together." Nodded, his face filled with determination. For the first time since they had met, he wasn't afraid. He didn't know what had just happened or what was coming next, but he knew one thing: there was no turning back. Their fates had already been sealed, and the battle was far from over. The clearing was eerily quiet now. The creatures that had once surrounded them had retreated into the darkness, leaving nothing behind but the faint echo of their growls. Lyra stood motionless, her glowing blue eyes flickering, her chest rising and falling with each breath, still pulsing with the energy she had unleashed. The power inside her had calmed, but it hadn't faded. If anything, it felt like it was waiting for something. John stood beside her, still in awe of what had just transpired. He had never seen anything like it, the raw, untamed power Lyra wielded. He didn't understand it, but he didn't need to. All he knew was that whatever they were, whatever this connection was, it was real. And it was dangerous. Lyra turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You're not safe here," she said, her voice low but firm. "The creatures will be back, and they won't stop until they have what they want." John's brow furrowed. "What do they want? And what do you mean, what they want?" Lyra's eyes darkened slightly. "It's not just me they're after. They're after us." John's confusion only deepened. "Us? What do you mean?" Lyra hesitated, as though the weight of her words were too much to bear. For a moment, she seemed almost distant, as if lost in a memory she didn't want to relive. But she steeled herself and looked back at him. "You've noticed it, haven't you? The way we're connected? The way your heart beats with mine? The way my eyes glow when I'm near you?" She paused. "There's a reason for it." John's eyes widened. He had noticed the strange pull between them, but he hadn't dared to question it. The connection was too overwhelming, too immediate, and too deep. Now standing here in the moonlight with Lyra, he began to realize just how much he didn't know. "Tell me," whispered, his voice tinged with urgency. Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze lifting to the stars above them, as though searching for answers in the vastness of the sky. "I wasn't born like this. I'm not like other people, not even like most of my kind." She turned to face him fully, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. "The last of a dying species, my people. They were once the rulers of the stars, but we were betrayed. We were hunted to the brink of extinction by those who feared our power." John stood silent, trying to process everything she was saying. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of her words. Lyra was an alien, that much was clear. But rulers of the stars? That was something else entirely. They called us the Eridans. Our power was unmatched, could manipulate the very fabric of the universe itself, bend energy to our will. But we were too powerful, too feared. So we became enemies of the very ones we once called allies, she continued, her voice thick with bitterness. "The creatures we just fought, they were sent by the ones who destroyed us. They're called the Zarin, and they've been hunting the last of the Eridans for centuries. They won't stop until they have every last one of us." Lyra's voice faltered slightly. "Now they've found me, and they've found you." John's heart pounded as the pieces began to fall into place. He had been thrust into this world, this strange, dangerous reality, without warning. But the more Lyra spoke, the more he realized that his connection to her was more than just coincidence. He was part of something much bigger. Why? Something ancient. "Why? Me?" he asked quietly. "Why did they come after us?" Lyra's gaze softened, and for the first time, there was a glimmer of vulnerability in her eyes. "I don't fully understand it yet, but I think it has something to do with our bond. It's unlike anything I've ever felt. The Zarin know that if they can break us apart, they'll destroy what's left of the Eridan power. But if we stay together, if we learn to control this bond, we might be able to stop them. John's mind was reeling. He had come to this forest, searching for answers, but what he had uncovered was far beyond anything he could have imagined. He wasn't just an ordinary man anymore. He was somehow connected to Lyra, to her ancient and powerful bloodline, and now he was a target. "But what do you mean, control the bond?" John asked, his voice shaking slightly. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "The power inside us, inside me, inside you, it's not just a reaction to danger, it's a force that can shape the future. But it's wild, unpredictable if we can learn to harness it, to control it together, we might have a chance to defeat the Zarin." John took a step closer, his heart pounding with both fear and a strange sense of purpose. He didn't know how he could help her, or if he even could, but he couldn't back down now. He had seen what Lyra was capable of. He had felt the power surging between them. "I'm with you," he said, his voice steady, despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. "Whatever it takes, I'll help you." Lyra's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, something flickered in her eyes. It was a look of gratitude, but also something deeper, something that told John she didn't want to face this alone. "I don't know what's ahead, John," she said quietly. "But I do know this, we're stronger together. And whatever the Zarin want will stop. Them, I'll make sure of it." John nodded, his resolve hardening. The world they were about to face was beyond anything he could have imagined. But one thing was clear. Together, they were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting to change the fate of two species and, perhaps, the universe itself. The forest had grown quiet again, but the stillness was far from peaceful. Lyra and John stood in the clearing, the weight of their newfound truth settling heavy on their shoulders. The creatures the Zarin were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. But it wasn't just the creatures that filled the air with tension. It was something else, something more personal, that hung between them like an invisible thread. Lyra's blue eyes glowed. Faintly in the dim light, the power within her still simmering beneath the surface. The bond between her and John had grown stronger, but so had the danger. She could feel it, the Zarin weren't going to wait much longer. Every passing moment brought them closer to the final confrontation. But there was another force at play. Now the choice they both had to make. John's heart raced as he looked at her, his mind swirling with thoughts and emotions he couldn't quite process. He had come to this forest thinking he was just another lost human, but now he found himself standing beside Lyra, an ancient being whose very existence had been torn apart by betrayal. Their connection was undeniable, their fates intertwined, in ways neither of them could fully comprehend. And yet, despite everything, John couldn't ignore the feeling that this was only the beginning. "Lyra," said quietly, his voice shaking just slightly, "what happens now?" Lyra's gaze softened, her eyes flickering as she looked up at the sky. For a moment, it was as though she was somewhere else, lost in a memory, a distant past. The weight of her lineage, her responsibility, was pressing down on her. She had been running from this moment for so long, afraid to confront the truth of what she was. But now, standing here with John, she realized there was no more running. "It's not over yet," she replied, her voice steady but filled with an undercurrent of uncertainty. "The Zarin will come for us, and they'll stop at nothing too. Destroy what's left of my people. But we have something they never expected." John frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Lyra took a step closer, her eyes locking with his, a deep understanding passing between them. "The bond we share, it's not just a connection, it's a weapon, a force that can either save us or destroy us. But it's up to us to decide. How we use it?" John's mind reeled as the gravity of her words sank in. A weapon? A force? The connection between them wasn't just something strange, it was the key to everything. The Zarin didn't just want her, they wanted them. They wanted to destroy the bond that could end their reign of terror. Lyra continued, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. "If we embrace this power, if we learn to control it, we might be able to stop the Zarin for good. But the danger is immense. It could consume us both. Not sure we can survive it. It's a risk I've been avoiding for so long? John's pulse quickened. What are you saying? Are you saying that we might be able to defeat them, but only if we unlock the full potential of the bond? Lyra finished for him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of hesitation. And that means accepting who we are, what we are meant to be. But it's a choice, John, a choice only we can make. John took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had always been an ordinary man, someone who followed a simple path. But now, standing at the edge of destiny, he realized that this moment, this decision, was bigger than anything he had ever faced. This was not just about survival. This was about shaping the future. He turned to Lyra, his expression determined, but filled with a quiet intensity. I've never felt anything like this before. The bond between us, the power. It's like nothing I can understand. But I know one thing. I can't leave you. I won't let you face this alone. Lyra's eyes softened, a flicker of something almost tender passing through them. For a moment she looked as if she might say something, but she paused, her lips pressing together in a tight line. There was so much she wanted to say, so much fear, so much uncertainty, but it was drowned out by the single truth she now understood. We're stronger together, she said, her voice steady with resolve. Whatever happens, John, we face it as one. The silence between them stretched for a moment, and in that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The decision was no longer just Lyra's to make. It was theirs. The creatures, the Zarin, were closing in. Lyra could feel them, their presence looming in the distance. The final confrontation was almost here, and there was no more running, no more hiding. They had to face the truth of their connection and accept the consequences of it. John reached out, his hand finding Lyra's. Their fingers intertwined, and for the first time, the bond between them felt like more than just an energy. It felt like a promise. With a deep breath, Lyra turned her gaze to the horizon. The dark shapes of the Zarin were beginning to emerge from the trees. They were ready to fight, ready to stand together. I'm with you, John said quietly, his voice unwavering. No matter what, Lyra's eyes met his, her expression fierce, resolute. And let's end this together. And as they stood side by side, their hearts beating as one, the energy between them surged, a wave of power so strong it seemed to bend the very air around them. The final battle had begun.